I was just making tea, barefoot in my kitchen, humming to myself, feeling safe. It's that kind of morning where everything feels right. But then my husband's phone buzzed. Once, then again. He was in the shower. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The message preview said, "She doesn't know yet." And the sender, my mom, my mother. That was the exact second my stomach dropped and I realized my entire life might be a lie. And what I found next? Let's just say they weren't ready for me to know. Adam had this way of touching the small of my back when I passed him in the kitchen, light, brief, and barely there. But it always made me smile. It was our quiet language, a code we'd built over 3 years of marriage. One little touch and I'd know he was with me, even if the world spun sideways. Lately, though, I noticed the touch wasn't there. We had just moved into our new home, a beautiful Craftsman with honey-colored floors and sun-drenched windows that Janice, my mom, insisted on helping us find. She loved being involved. From picking out backsplash tiles to testing mattress firmness, she was there for every decision. Sometimes I teased her that she was more excited than I was, and she'd just wink and say, "Well, you're my only baby. Of course I want your first." House to be perfect, and it was perfect. At least it looked that way from the outside. Adam and I had been trying for a baby since last spring. Every ovulation app pinged with hope. Every late period sparked a flicker of excitement. He bought prenatal vitamins before I even thought to. Quick, we picked out baby names in bed on rainy Sundays. Okay? And every time I took a test, he was the one sitting on the edge of the tub, holding my hand. Even when the answer was no, he'd smile and say, "Next time, okay?" But next time began to feel like a phrase too polished, too practiced. It was little things at first. The way Adam's eyes didn't linger when I changed in front of him. The shift in his voice when I brought up visiting my mom. And how he never wanted to linger at her house anymore. Not even for her famous rosemary chicken, which used to be his favorite. I chalked it up to stress. He was working late more. Maybe he was just tired. Janice had changed too, in her own way. She still called often, still sent me funny memes and podcast links, but her voice had lost its usual warmth. Her texts were shorter, and when she hugged me, it felt more like a formality than love. Once, after I gushed about a new fertility supplement I'd started, she went quiet for a beat too long and muttered, "You don't have to force it, Lena. Some things just aren't meant to happen right away." I laughed it off, but that sentence stayed in the back of my throat for days. Still, I told myself it was just a phase. Marriage had seasons. Mothers had moods. I was probably overthinking things. That's what Adam would say when I asked if something was bothering him. "If you're doing that thing again," he'd chuckle, kissing my temple, reading between lines that don't exist. But one night I noticed him watching me across the dinner table, not with love, but with something I couldn't name. His fork paused midair. His eyes were locked on my face, like he didn't recognize it. I blinked, and he snapped out of it, grinned, and asked me to pass the salt. Then came the night Janice canceled dinner on me last minute, something she never did. She claimed she had a migraine. I dropped off soup anyway, letting myself in. With the spare key, the house was clean, quiet. But her perfume hung heavy in the air, and there were 2 wine glasses in the sink. Still, I said nothing. I didn't want to be that woman, paranoid, suspicious, always poking at shadows. I trusted them. They were the 2 people who had always made me feel safe. My mother, who raised me alone, and my husband, who once drove across 3 states. Just to propose at the mountain overlook where we first said "I love you." They wouldn't hurt me, at least. That's what I repeated to myself every time. I felt something cold wrap around the edges of our warm little life. One Sunday morning, we had brunch on the back patio. The sun was soft, the eggs slightly overdone, and Adam looked up from his phone and said, "We should plant those hydrangeas your mom likes, don't you think?" I stared at him. He hadn't mentioned Janice in weeks. Not since she canceled. Our last 3 plans. And yet, here he was, remembering her favorite flower. I smiled, said sure, then excused myself to the bathroom, locked the door, and let the confusion settle deep into my chest like fog rolling in. I didn't want to admit it then, but the cracks were already forming. Not in a dramatic screaming match kind of way, but in the soft, quiet erosion of connection. It's the kind that happens when something starts to live in the space between two people. Something neither of them wants to name. Looking back now, I know that was the last time things still looked normal, even if nothing really was. It started with a laugh. One of those laughs that sounds forced, too loud for the moment. Adam made a joke about the wine Janice brought to Sunday dinner, something about it tasting like expired grape juice. And she let out this brittle, uncomfortable sound. It didn't reach her eyes. Neither of them looked at each other after. That I remember sitting there, pushing peas around my plate, watching them not watching each other. Janice usually hovered, always asking Adam if he needed more of this or that. And Adam, for all his quiet charm, was always polite, always asking how her back was doing or if she needed help bringing dishes to the sink. But that night, the air was thick with avoidance, like they were both trying not to be in the same room. At one point, Adam dropped his fork and leaned down to grab it. I caught Janice staring at him, not in anger, not in affection, but with something harder to place. Guilt, regret. Her jaw was tight, her eyes glassy. But the second he sat back up, she looked away and asked me how work was going, like nothing had happened. I told myself not to overanalyze. Maybe they've just had an awkward interaction before I arrived. Maybe she made a comment that rubbed him the wrong way. Still, that night I couldn't sleep. It wasn't just the dinner. There had been other things. Adam's phone had started living in his pocket. He used to leave it face up on the counter or nightstand, not thinking twice. It was always screened down, even when it buzzed. He claimed work was hectic, too many clients calling, too many deadlines. He wasn't wrong. He was a software developer, juggling a brutal project with tight deliverables. But that didn't explain why he stepped out of the room to text back sometimes, or why he started keeping it on silent. Janice had become harder to reach, too. She canceled lunch twice in 1 week, something she never did. When I offered to drop by, she said she was out running errands, but her car was in the driveway when I drove past her house later that day. I didn't knock, just sat there in my car, staring at the light in her kitchen window. And then there was the photo. I had been sorting through old pictures for a scrapbooking project I never seemed to finish. Flipping through an envelope of prints from 2 years ago, a family trip to Lake Arrowhead. I found one that caught me off guard. It was a candid of the three of us, me in the middle, Adam on my left, Janice on my right. But it wasn't me who drew my eyes in. It was them. It's the way Janice had her hand on his shoulder. It's the way he leaned ever so slightly toward her. It wasn't intimate. Not exactly, but it was too familiar. Too natural. I held that photo for a long time, my fingertips growing numb around its edges. Then I shoved it back in the envelope and told myself I was imagining things, but I wasn't. Not really. The signs were small. They were everywhere. Adam stopped mentioning Janice in conversation. If I brought her up, he'd nod absently or change the subject. If she texted me while we were together, he wouldn't ask what she said. He used to be curious, even amused by how often we talked. Now he seemed to stiffen at the sound of her name, and Janice. God, Janice had gone cold, in a way I didn't know she could. My mother had always been protective, loving, sometimes even too involved. But lately, her affection felt practiced. She rarely touched me anymore. Her hugs had become one-armed brief. She looked past me more than at me. Once, I caught her staring out the window while I was telling her about an appointment with my fertility doctor. She blinked, smiled, and asked me to repeat everything like she hadn't heard a word. Still, I doubted myself. I kept doubting myself. Because what sane woman would even think something was going on between her husband and her mother? One morning, I got up early to prep breakfast. Adam had slept in the guest room the night before, claiming a headache and needing rest. That wasn't unusual. He'd started doing that on occasion, especially after a long week. I didn't question it anymore. I heard the shower running upstairs and smiled at the sound. Maybe today would be better. I cracked eggs into a bowl, set toast in the toaster, and reached across the table to clear some space. That's when I saw it. Adam's phone. Sitting alone on the wooden table, screen up and unlocked. I don't know why I looked. Maybe I was hoping to prove myself wrong. Maybe I wanted to catch a glimpse of something boring, a work message, a sports score, a joke from a friend. Anything that would make me feel foolish for being suspicious. But the message? Preview was already lit up. From Janice message. She doesn't know yet. The world narrowed into a tunnel. The kitchen faded, the egg timer buzzed somewhere behind me, and the sound of the water upstairs grew louder in my ears. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. That text, those 5 words shifted something permanent in my body, like my bones knew before my brain did. She doesn't know yet, and now she did. My hands were shaking before I even picked the phone up. I didn't plan to open the messages. I really didn't. I told myself to just walk away, go back to making eggs, pretend I never saw the preview. But something inside me, maybe the same instinct that once helped me dodge oncoming traffic as a kid, knew this wasn't nothing. That text wasn't some work thing. It wasn't about a birthday surprise. It was personal, sharp, weighted. She doesn't know yet. I opened the thread. At first, it looked harmless. String of short, dry messages. Mentions of Aaron's family, dinner planning, even one about my favorite bakery being out of peach scones. But when I scrolled back, the tone began to shift. And then it hit me. The thread didn't start weeks ago or even months. It went years back. It's 2 years, to be exact. Lake Arrowhead, the trip that was supposed to be a family recharge. I had just been passed over for a promotion, and Adam was working overtime constantly. Janice offered to rent a cabin, a quiet space with no Wi-Fi and too much wine. I remembered falling asleep early one night, my head spinning from red wine and exhaustion, while Adam and Janice stayed out on the deck talking. Apparently, that night was the beginning of everything. His message, "You really helped me get through that week. I don't think I ever told you that." Hers, "You looked like you needed someone, and I didn't want to see you fall apart." I was there, I always will be. My chest tightened. My eyes burned, but I couldn't stop reading. The conversation grew more intimate as time passed, less casual, more coded. I could tell when things shifted from comfort to something else. Entirely. Adam, I can't stop thinking about you. Janice, then don't. It's not like we're hurting her. Not really. My breath caught in my throat. Not hurting me? Each line was like a stone through glass, shattering every memory I had of the past 2 years. The inside jokes, the shared glances, the days Adam came home late and said he'd grab dinner alone. I could suddenly see them, the subtext, the quiet betrayal that had wrapped itself around my life like ivy. Growing in silence while I watered the wrong roots. Worse still was the way Janice wrote about me, not as her daughter, but as a problem, a barrier, an obstacle. She's obsessed with getting pregnant. It's all she talks about. Maybe it's not meant to happen for her. You and I both know what real connection feels like. It's too busy chasing fairy tales. My stomach twisted. I stumbled to a chair, the phone still glowing in my hand. My mom, the woman who raised me, who kissed every scraped knee, who told me I was the most important thing in her life, had been jealous of me. Not just dismissive, not cold, jealous, and Adam, my husband. The man who once cried when I had a miscarriage, the man who told me I was his home, had been confiding in her, turning to her, needing her. I found the message from just a few days ago, the one that tied it all together. Adam, we need to tell her soon. I can't keep pretending. I sat there, for what felt like hours, rereading it again and again. The word pretending was like acid. pretending to be loyal, pretending to love me, pretending our life was real, pretending I was enough. That was when the tears came. Not the loud, dramatic sobs you see in movies, just the quiet kind. The ones that slip down your face while you sit frozen, staring into a version of your life you didn't know existed. I wasn't angry, not yet. I wasn't even hurt, not in the way I expected. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything I thought I was and replaced it with silence. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone. I just watched the screen dim, then fade to black. Adam was still in the shower. The sound of the water felt intrusive, like a lie running through my house. I imagined him in there, humming to himself, lathering his hair. Maybe even smiling while I sat in the kitchen surrounded by betrayal. Janice used to say I was too sensitive. I saw things others didn't. I guess she was right, because I saw it now, all of it. The missed birthdays she forgot to call me for. The way she dodged my questions when I asked how she really felt about Adam. The weird tension when she hugged me after our wedding, how stiff she was. Our eyes didn't crinkle at the corners like they used to. They'd been slowly rewriting the truth right in front of me, smiling while they buried me under a life I thought was mine. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. I didn't have a plan. But I knew one thing. They thought I didn't know. Now I did, and I'd never unknow it again. The next morning I made breakfast like I always did, eggs slightly runny, toast with too much butter. Brian didn't notice I hadn't looked him in the eye once. He scrolled through his phone, chuckled once or twice, then said he was heading out early. I smiled. "Drive safe," I whispered. But in my mind I watched his thumb hesitate over his phone right before he pocketed it too fast. The minute the door closed, I exhaled, slowly, deliberately. My hands were steady as I walked over to the table. His phone was gone, of course. He wasn't that sloppy. But it didn't matter. I had already memorized his passcode 2 weeks ago. The new habit of locking it. That had only started after my mom's name appeared on his screen. I didn't confront either of them. Not yet. Instead, I became something else entirely. A ghost inside my own house. Present, but invisible. I watched everything, the way Brian hesitated before answering my calls. The way Janice's perfume lingered on the cushions after her unexpected visits. It's the way they never looked nervous enough to think I might notice. They thought I was stupid, naive, grateful to just have a family at all. I played along. I cooked dinners and asked about their day. I even texted Janice like usual, "Can you bring the peach pie on Sunday?" She sent back a heart emoji. I stared at it for a long time. It was the same one Brian sent me when he forgot our anniversary. That weekend when Janice came over, I greeted her with a smile so wide it felt like my jaw might crack. She kissed my cheek like nothing had happened, like she hadn't sent that text. Like she hadn't raised me alone and still chosen to betray me. She left her purse on the couch. I excused myself to the kitchen, then doubled back, silent as a breath. My phone camera captured everything inside. Prescription bottles not in her name, key I didn't recognize, and a tiny USB drive tucked into a zip pocket. I didn't touch it. Not yet. But I recorded it all and I stored the video in 3 separate cloud drives. The next day, I called my father's old attorney, Mr. Calloway. He hadn't seen me since the funeral 5 years ago. He looked thinner, sadder, but his voice was steady when I asked him the question I had swallowed for too long. Did my dad leave me anything I wasn't told about? He paused, then leaned back in his chair like the truth had been burning in his spine all this time. "Yes," he said, "and I regret how it was handled." It turns out my father had left a trust. Not a fortune, but something enough to build a life. A small house he owned in cash, money set aside for education, and a letter. A handwritten one addressed to me. But none of it had ever reached me. Janice, as the executor, claimed I wanted none of it. That I wanted to cut ties and be independent. She'd said I didn't want the reminder. I sat there completely still as Mr. Calloway slid the copy of the will across the table. I saw her signature, saw my forged one too, shaky, rushed but passable. She had stolen it all. Brian's betrayal stung, but this was something different. This wasn't just disloyalty. This was planned, calculated, years of performance wrapped in motherly smiles and fake empathy. I walked out of the office into cold wind and sudden clarity. My legs trembled, but not from weakness, from restraint. I could have screamed, cried, marched straight to her house and demanded answers. But I didn't. Instead, I went home and cleaned the entire kitchen. Every surface, every drawer. I needed control and I needed calm, 'cause now I had a new role to play every night after that. I watched their routines like a movie I'd already seen once and now knew all the twists. I set up a second cloud camera facing the living room. I recorded Janice every time she came over, how long she stayed, what she touched, how Brian's face changed when she was near. And slowly I pieced the rest together. The USB from her purse. I found a matching one at the tech store and swapped them during her next visit. Inside it, photos of me. Screenshots of my social media demise, a scanned copy of the real will, unedited, untouched, dated a year earlier than the one submitted, and a PDF of an email chain between her and a man I didn't recognize. But I would later dot everything I needed was beginning to fall into place, and still I said nothing. At dinner, I asked Brian how work was. I listened as he lied about his hours and smiled as he told me we needed a vacation. Just us, he said. We've been off lately. I almost laughed. I'd love that, I said softly. Let's go somewhere warm. In his eyes, I saw relief. In mine, he saw love. But beneath it, deeper than he could ever see, was calculation. Because now, I wasn't waiting for them to tell me the truth. I was preparing to show it to them. And when I did, they wouldn't even see it coming. Adam looked confused when he arrived at the little bistro I'd chosen. That confused smile people wear when something feels off but they're trying to stay polite. I had called it a big night, and I knew he assumed I was either pregnant or ready to apologize for my paranoia. He wasn't alone in that assumption. Janice walked in 10 minutes later. In a green dress too tight for comfort and heels that clacked too loudly for a quiet restaurant. She didn't see Adam at first. When she did, her face barely twitched, just a single blink too long. I stood and greeted them both with warmth that felt artificial even to me. I motioned to the reserved table in the back, cozy and intimate, just the three of us. They exchanged a brief glance, but I interrupted it with my voice, upbeat and controlled. Thanks for coming. Tonight's special. Janice smiled too widely. Adam forced a little chuckle. I poured the wine. Before we sat down to eat, I asked to speak to each of them separately. I pulled Adam aside first. Outside the restaurant near the patio, where string lights cast soft shadows across his face, I told Janice everything. I said, eyes calm, voice steady. She told me what you two did. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. He laughed nervously. Wait, Lena, are you serious? She said that. She said you begged her not to tell me. That you loved me, but couldn't. Help yourself. His face twisted like he was trying to figure out which lie would hold up best. She's lying, he said quickly. Lena, I swear on everything. I raised a hand. I don't need your story now. I just thought you should know what she said. I watched the gears grind behind his eyes. I watched panic begin to rise. Then I walked back inside, not waiting for his response. Janice came out next, her perfume lingering before she even crossed the threshold. I told Adam everything. I said, my voice echoing the same icy calm. He said you seduced him. Said it meant nothing. That you were desperate. Her mouth twitched. He said that. Her voice was low, sharp. Wow, real classy. He also said you showed up uninvited the night it happened. That he tried to stop it. She looked away, nostrils flaring. He's lying, she muttered. He begged me for weeks. Even said I'm not here to fight about who did what. I interrupted, my voice flat. I just thought you should know where he stands. She didn't reply. She turned and walked back inside, her shoulders tense and her lips drawn in a thin line. Dinner was quiet, too quiet. Adam kept glancing at Janice. She stared at her glass. I took my time cutting into my steak, pretending not to notice the tension building between them like a ticking bomb. Then I set my fork down and looked up, smiling softly. I have an announcement. Both their heads jerked toward me, expressions somewhere between dread and hope. I'm pregnant. Janice blinked. Adam froze wineglass halfway to his mouth. The silence that followed was exquisite. I let it hang, let it soak. I wanted to wait to tell you, I continued, brushing a non-existent crumb from the table because I wanted you both here. The two people I trusted most. Still, no one spoke. Adam looked like he wanted to disappear. Janice's face was unreadable, but her knuckles were white against her napkin. Then I laughed. But I'm not pregnant. Adam exhaled, confused. Janice blinked rapidly. I just wanted to see how you'd react. I said, tone light. Playful, like I hadn't just tossed a grenade onto the table. Adam tried to smile, but it faltered. And then I leaned in, slow and deliberate. What I am, I said, voice now low and sharp, is informed. I know everything. The texts, the hotel, the lies. The game you thought I was too blind to see. Janice flinched first. Adam turned pale. I've known for weeks, I continued. And every conversation, every message, every tearful excuse. Recorded, saved, backed up. Their faces were perfect mirrors of shock and fear. I sat back in my chair, finished my wine, and smiled for real this time. Not soft or sad, but cold and clean. I invited you here so I could watch it sink in. You didn't just betray me. You underestimated me. They said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The check arrived. I paid it in full. And as I stood up to leave, I turned one last time. I was never the fool. I was just waiting for the right night to let you both know you're done playing with me. Then I walked out. The sound of their stunned silence louder than any scream. He didn't even try to deny it. When Lena handed Adam the divorce papers, his face was blank. Not shocked, not ashamed, just tired. Like he'd finally been caught in a game he didn't even enjoy playing anymore. I guess this was coming, he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck like he had a headache. No, Lena replied, her voice low and steady. It came the second you lied to me and kept lying even when the truth was sitting in plain sight. He looked at her then for the first time in what felt like weeks. But Lena didn't flinch. The Lena he once knew would have begged for answers, searched his eyes for guilt. Maybe even offered a second chance, just to feel loved again. But not this Lena. This Lena had already spoken to her father. Adam's position at the company, a cushy management job handed to him on a silver platter because Lena vouched for him, was gone within 48 hours. Her father hadn't needed much convincing. Just the screenshots, the text logs, the location, timestamps, cold, hard data. The same kind of evidence Adam used to dismiss whenever Lena felt something was off. Now it was real enough to cost him everything. I didn't think you'd go that far, he said when the call came in confirming his termination. I didn't think you'd cheat with my mother, Lena replied. So I guess we both misjudged each other. She hung up before he could respond. No tears, no screaming, silence. Janice didn't get a call. She got a letter, folded neatly, no return address. Just Lena's handwriting, small, careful. And final, I spent most of my life trying to make you proud. And you spent most of yours reminding me I never would. I used to wonder why. Now I don't care. Goodbye. Lena mailed it and blocked her number the same day. The relief didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly like sunlight under a door that had been locked for years. She changed the locks on the house, painted the bedroom walls, threw out the wine glasses Adam insisted they needed 4 adult dinner parties that never happened. She deleted playlists, canceled shared subscriptions, and cut her hair, not drastically. It's just enough to make her reflection feel like someone new. She slept better. Little each night. She started eating dinner on the couch with her feet tucked, under a blanket, watching old sitcoms without anyone criticizing her taste. She talked to friends again, the ones Adam always said were too dramatic or single for a reason. Turns out they'd been waiting for her to come back. And when she did, they showed up with wine, junk food, and rage on her behalf. Not pity, just real, righteous anger that made Lena feel less alone. She went back to therapy, not to fix herself, but to find the version of her that got buried under all the compromising and pretending. The woman who used to love quiet mornings and books and mint tea. The woman who used to laugh without waiting to see if it was the right moment. One afternoon, sitting on her balcony, that woman finally returned, not with a dramatic speech or big realization, just a deep exhale. A breath that didn't catch in her chest like it used to. She didn't need Adam to hurt the way she had. She didn't need Janice to feel shame or guilt or even regret. What she needed was space. To stand somewhere honest, somewhere still. And let that be enough. Maybe that was the biggest revenge of all. Refusing to let the worst parts of someone else define the rest of you. I thought I'd feel broken, Lena whispered into the air, her voice soft, like a secret. But I don't. I feel clean, like the noise is finally gone. She wasn't naive anymore, but she wasn't bitter either. She was just done. And in a world where people like Adam and Janice spun chaos like candy, being done was the ultimate power dot, because when someone shows you exactly who they are, and you choose to walk away instead of staying to fix them, you win. You win your peace. You win yourself back. And Lena, she wasn't anyone's shadow. Anymore, not a daughter trying to earn love. Not a wife trying to forgive the unforgivable. She was free, and sometimes freedom doesn't come from fighting louder. It comes from walking away quieter, never turning back.